Hello, everybody. This is your Congresswoman Frederica Wilson in Miami, Florida. Thank you so much for joining us for our Teletown Hall to discuss what's happening in Washington, D.C. and cut through all the chaos, what it means for you. So listen up. Before I go on, if you have a question that you want to ask me or any of our guests at any point, press *3 and press 6 to subscribe to the newsletter. At any point, you can press *3 and someone will take your question and write it down. We will ask some of those questions to our guest during the Q&A portion of the conversation. And before we begin this town hall, I want to start by saying that my heart is with the victims of the Minneapolis school shooting that happened earlier today. These are children that got shot, and we cannot normalize this. I was a school teacher and a school principal, and I cannot fathom the idea of seeing my school shot up. And as a mother, I cannot fathom the idea of my children getting shot when they were in school. So it's over time for us to tackle gun violence head on. And I truly hope that today is a day we will never forget as a nation, because I know the families affected by this shooting will never, ever forget. All of the children will be affected by this tragedy forever. Just a moment of silence, please. Now, why are we here today? We are here to talk about our democracy, our health, and our future. Republicans took power in January, and it has been nothing short of an utter disaster and a string of heartless decisions. I have seen many, many horrendous actions in my lifetime in government, but none quite as horrible as the law Congress just passed this July, the big, ugly bill, they call it, and now it is called the big, ugly law. It's one of the most bankrupt pieces of legislation I've ever seen, and it's a death sentence for millions. Put it simply, people will die from this bill. Hospitals will close. Folks will go hungry thanks to Medicaid and food assistance being cut and slashed. Let's just start with some simple facts. 17 million people will lose their health care. Think about that. 5 million people will lose access to food assistance. 19.4 million children are at risk of losing their free and reduced lunch. The 42 million Americans who hold federal student loan debt can expect increased payments by almost $200. This is just the tip of the iceberg of this heartless law. And all for what? For what? To give tax breaks to greedy billionaires who would still be rich even if they spent $10 million a day for the next 50 years. You hear me? How much money do you need? How much money do you want? It will also send more ICE people into our communities so they can continue terrorizing immigrants and send hardworking immigrants to different black hole detention centers. I represent an immigrant-rich community, one which I call the Little United Nations. Communities like mine in South Florida will be the hardest hit by this law. The ugly law cuts to food assistance, and it won't even take effect until after the midterms, just so Republicans cannot be blamed by voters before they head to the polls to vote. They want you to forget that they backstabbed the American people. But we all must remember this day of betrayal they unleashed. And all while this is happening, the administration has moved swiftly to take control of the entire government. You see, we should have checks and balances. We have the courts, the White House, Republicans and Democrats in Congress, all working to keep each other in check. But right now, only the Democratic Party and the White House exist because Republicans in Congress and across the nation, along with this ultra-conservative Supreme Court, have ceded all of their power to the White House. They say, whatever you want, Mr. President, we will deliver. We are in the majority. We are scared of you, and we will give you anything you ask for. Whether it's the governor of Texas, Republican members of Congress, and everyone in between, they all have given up their power, the power that they fought so hard to earn this past election. So we're on the cusp of a dictatorship. They have been working overtime to rig the upcoming election to ensure they hold power at the expense of the will of the people. They have deployed the National Guard in the streets of our nation's capital and are prepared to do so nationwide, just like authoritarians do when they want to declare martial law. They have tried to abolish agencies like our beloved Department of Education and U.S. Agency of International Development, which is USAID, which only Congress has the power to disband, not the White House. And they have dismantled much of the federal workforce, all as part of an authoritarian push to seize power. And most of these women, most of the people who have been fired are Black women. Keep that in mind. These are trying times as a nation. This is an attack on our democracy to the likes we've never seen. And with this Teletown Hall, I have brought together some of the nation's foremost leaders and experts to explain and inform you on what has been going on in Congress and in this administration, so you don't get caught off guard. You won't be blindsided when your student loans go up or your health care prices go up. Information is power, and we're here to answer your questions on what to expect in the coming months and provide guidance on how to best navigate the recent changes in law. But I also want to stop for a moment. One question I get asked often: what are we doing, meaning the Democrats, to fight back? Let's be clear. The big ugly law that I've been referencing has already been signed into law in July. So it's law. And while the Democratic Party may not have won that battle, we will win the war. And we will not stop fighting for you. We must continue to fight to heal this nation for the sake of its people, because God Almighty is on our side. We cannot continue like this. So whether it's litigation, legislation, protesting, or fighting fire with fire, we are ready to give it our all, because this moment demands that we fight back hard, toe to toe. So I'm glad that I have some of my colleagues on this call, because we are not going to give up. We will talk more about this topic throughout this Teletown hall, but I want you to know that we are all in this battle for the soul of our nation. We're not letting up, because too much is on the line. We will fight to protect health care and food assistance. We will fight to defend public schools. We will fight for immigration rights. We will fight to lower costs, not to raise them. And we will defend the Constitution. That is my promise to you, and that is what Democrats will always stand for. So now I'm glad to have my friend and colleague on this call right now to talk about some of the ways House Democrats are fighting back. He is the Assistant Democratic Leader, role model, Joe. He is a fighter and an acclaimed support, and always. I want to pass it on to him to talk about what we are doing to protect Representative Wilson.
Can't hear him. So keep going.
Is he speaking?
No.
We have
Yes,
some
Ms.
technical
Wilson.
difficulties with Representative Naguse. So
My
now
apologies. Representative Wilson, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. My apologies for the technical difficulties. Apparently, the technical difficulties here in Colorado were a little bit more difficult. My apologies. But thank you, first and foremost, for having me this evening. Thank you for your clarity of conviction and your moral courage. And I'm grateful to you, of course, to Ms. Rye and all of my colleagues who I know will be joining you this evening to speak to your constituents in South Florida about the perilous moment facing our republic and the work that we're doing to vindicate our Constitution. Let me first just say to the people that you are so blessed to represent that when Ms. Wilson makes a promise that she will defend the Constitution, you know that she means it, because she has spent her career doing precisely that. And I'm grateful to her for her leadership, particularly in a moment as difficult and as troublesome as this one. As Ms. Wilson mentioned, there are no shortage of a parade of horribles that this administration is regrettably pursuing, and that I believe is ultimately harming the people of South Florida as much as it is harming the people of the great state of Colorado that I have the privilege of serving. It is an all-hands-on-deck moment, as our minority leader, Leader Jeffries, often reminds the members of the House Democratic Caucus. And it requires all of us, in my view, to stand up, to speak out, and to speak up for the voiceless and for those in our community who are under attack. So here's how we're responding. First and foremost, Leader Jeffries, early on in this year, following the president's inauguration, created a litigation working group and task force. The purpose of that task force is simple: to develop legislative oversight and legal strategies to respond to the lawlessness of the Trump administration. I am grateful that Ms. Wilson and so many other members of our caucus have joined in that effort together as members of the task force to push back. And we have been hard at work doing precisely that through legislation that we've introduced, including on the committees on which Ms. Wilson serves, in particular the House Education Committee, through a variety of different oversight and procedural tools that we have deployed in just the last several months, and principally through litigation. As we know, right now, our colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle have capitulated to this president time and time again, which has compelled us to utilize other avenues to hold the administration accountable and to vindicate the Constitution and the rule of law. And we have done that by making clear our voice in a court of law using the Article III branch of our government, the judiciary. The litigation working group has now filed over 10 amicus briefs in federal courts across the country, including at the district court, appellate court level. We have had some success, and that is in no small part due to, as I said, the leadership of members like Representative Wilson, who are willing to lend their name in support of these efforts on behalf of the people that she represents. We've also initiated direct litigation with respect to vindicating the oversight statutory provisions in law that provide for oversight to be conducted at detention facilities, just by way of example. You can learn more about the litigation that we are pursuing, as well as the legislative responses and the oversight tools that I referenced, at litigationandresponse.house.gov. I'll repeat, that's litigationandresponse.house.gov. I'll close by echoing a point that was articulated so well by my good friend, Representative Wilson. This is a moment that requires everyone to step forward. I hope that you will use the tool on the website that I just referenced to give us your feedback, your suggestions, your ideas about ways that you think we should be responding in this perilous moment for our republic. We need your insight, we need your wisdom, we need your expertise, and we are counting on you to make your voices heard, as we know that you will do. So again, I say thank you for giving me the privilege of coming by for just a few moments. I apologize that I could not be with you on camera, but nonetheless, I'm so grateful to be able to join you all briefly and to be in this fight with Representative Wilson in particular. And I look forward to hopefully visiting all of you in short order in person again sometime soon. With that, I will turn it back over to Angela.
Thank you so much, Congressman Nagus. We see your smiling, beautiful face on camera, though. We appreciate all that you said. You know, and in the Democratic caucus, we are led by a fighter, Leader Jeffries, who we're fighting real hard for him to be Speaker. And he blessed us in Miami last year at our Dr. Martin Luther King breakfast for the 5,000 role models of excellence. We're so, so proud of him. And I just saw the crowd on the screen. Oh my God, I'm so excited. They're telling me over 20,000 people are watching and 65,000 people have submitted questions and are leaving messages. So thank you so much to all of you experts who are joining us tonight. So now I will pass the microphone on to our fabulous, beautiful moderator who will guide today's discussion, Angela Rye. She was the former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus and since then has served as a political commentator on CNN and The Breakfast Club and is a co-host of the Native Land Pod. She has been in the fight for justice for a long time, and we're so happy to have her here. She is a woman on the move and is unbossed and unbought. We love you, Angela. Now remember, everyone, you don't have to wait until the Q&A part of the discussion to start asking questions. Just press *3 at any point so someone can take your question down for the Q&A portion, and press 6 to subscribe to our newsletter. And with that, Angela, take it away.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Wilson. For all of our guests who will be speaking this evening, if you could do me a huge favor from an audio perspective and just make sure you're muted until you begin to speak. If you all can, where you are at home or wherever you may be calling in from or viewing from, please make sure you give the Congresswoman representing Florida's 24th District a round of applause, even on your own. I'm going to do a clap. I love you too, Congresswoman. That's my heart for you. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce the panelists who will be joining us this evening. I don't know about you all, but I would love to see them on the screen and not just me. But I want to make sure that I tell them all thank you. Thank you all so much for being here, for one of my forever bosses with the Congressional Black Caucus. Joining us today, we have the Congressman for Maryland's 8th Congressional District and the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin. If I had an opportunity to ask him today, I would ask him about the Electoral College. Hint, hint, send it in for me. He is one of the foremost constitutional scholars in the nation and has been challenging all of the many administration's unconstitutional actions. Please make sure you give it up virtually for Congressman Raskin. We will also have former Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, who worked under the Biden administration to implement many of the critical student loan programs that Americans rely on every single day. He'll be talking to us about the changes to student loans under this law, the big ugly one that Congresswoman Wilson has referenced, the challenges public schools face under this law, and the important work of the Department of Education and probably why it shouldn't be dismantled. If that's not in there, y'all go ahead and throw that one in there for me too. We also have a former Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, who worked hand in hand with President Obama to implement the historic Affordable Care Act. It was so historic, they tried to dismantle the thing several times, but she's here to tell the story. She'll be discussing many of the upcoming cuts to health care that this law unleashes. We have the former Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, who will discuss how this administration and this law have taken a wrecking ball to this economy and how some of the cuts to food assistance may not affect you, but it will certainly impact someone in your family or in your neighborhood. We also have Sue Chung, the executive director of Americans for Immigrant Justice. If you all are watching the news, you cannot turn a blind eye to all of the many immigrant crises that we are witnessing every single day. She will discuss some of the immigration policies this administration has been trying to implement, along with how this administration has continued to pour resources into terrorizing immigrants. Once we finish talking with all of our amazing panelists, we will have a Q&A so you can ask any of our panelists, including Ms. Wilson, any pressing questions you may have. Remember, you do not have to wait until the Q&A portion to start asking questions. Just press *3 at any point so someone can take your question down. And without further ado, I have the opportunity to pass the mic to Congressman Jamie Raskin to set the scene and the tone on the constitutional crisis at hand and the authoritarian nature of this current administration. Congressman? Now that's my fault because I told everybody to get on mute. Now I need you off mute so we can hear you.
There we go. Angela, thank you for allowing me to be heard. Frederica Wilson, thank you for your magnificent leadership and your activism and your wonderful service that you render to the people of Florida. And hello to all my friends down in Florida. I'm delighted to be with you guys tonight. Very big topic just for 4 or 5 minutes here. Let me start actually with a point that Angela just made about the Electoral College. You know, we are at a point in our history where we should be moving forward on democracy. And Tocqueville in Democracy in America said that democracy and voting rights in our country are either shrinking and shriveling away, or they're growing and expanding, and we should be on the growth track. And that means we should be electing the president in the 21st century the way we're electing governors and senators and representatives and mayors and everybody else. Whoever gets the most votes wins. I don't need to tell the people of Florida that the Electoral College is an accident waiting to happen that has delivered to us 5 presidents in our history who lost in the popular vote and who yet won dubious Electoral College victories twice in this century alone, once in 2000 in Bush versus Gore and once in 2016 with Donald Trump. So it's a sordid record there. And the Electoral College marginalizes the vast majority of Americans who live in safe red states or safe blue states. And the whole election comes down to 4 or 5 states. And it's just an irrational way to run a presidential election. So we should be moving forward on that. But instead, we're moving backwards. We're seeing massive attacks on the right to vote. We're seeing the extreme gerrymandering of our congressional districts, not just the once a decade, bare knuckled rugby match everybody got used to, but every 2 years now, they want to move us to a Hunger Games winner take all, basically bitter death match competition. And that's what they're giving to us in Texas. And we're going to have to fight back. We've got to fight fire with fire. We tried to fight fire with water. We tried to get rid of party gerrymandering in the For the People Act. And every Republican voted against it. All the Democrats supported it. But unfortunately, we were not able to get it through the Republican-controlled Senate. So, look, we are in the fight of our lives here to defend democracy. The Trump administration is trying to dismantle all of the programmatic Democratic successes we've had over the last century. They're attacking Medicaid. They want to throw 17 million people off of Medicaid, and they will do it if Congress doesn't change hands next year. They're trying to dismantle Social Security. They're already dismantling the Social Security offices and making it impossible to get through on the phones on Social Security. They're taking down many of the great programs and the great departments that have been so critical to American progress, including NIH, where they're doing life-saving scientific research into cystic fibrosis, multiple sclerosis, sickle cell anemia, breast cancer, colon cancer, malignant narcissistic personality disorder, all of the killer diseases of our time. And they are just gutting the NIH. They're gutting and dismantling the Agency for International Development, which has been turned into a mere shadow of what it once was. They're dismantling the Department of Education, you name it. So they're taking apart the government. They're assaulting the federal workforce, violating the civil service rights of federal workers. They are also taking apart our international alliances. Donald Trump has effectively switched sides in the Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. America has stood strong for the people of Ukraine and their democracy. And now Donald Trump is, of course, playing footsie with Vladimir Putin and doing everything he can to undermine the Ukrainian cause. So we're betraying our friends abroad. We are undermining democracy abroad, and they are attacking democracy and voting rights and political equality at home. They want to take down what's left of the Voting Rights Act. Of course, the Supreme Court in 2013 in Shelby County versus Holder cut Section 5 out of the Voting Rights Act, dismantling the pre-clearance requirement. Now they want to go after Section 2, basically by saying that the majority African-American and majority Hispanic districts are themselves illegal and unconstitutional. So we're living in a time very closely analogous to what happened at the end of the Civil War with the end of Reconstruction, as they try to dismantle all of the social gains we've made, the rights of the people to vote, and even our memory of what has taken place in America as they try to take apart, basic historical exhibits at the Smithsonian Institution. Donald Trump has said that there's been too much focus on the bad aspects of slavery. They're there's an exhibit at the Smithsonian called the Enola Gay exhibit, and it's named after the wife of the pilot who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So they had an exhibit of the Enola Gay, the airplane, and one of their Doge people typed in gay lesbian into the website, and the Enola Gay exhibit came up. It's of course got nothing to do with the LGBTQ movement, but they just canceled the exhibit because the word gay was in there. And this is like how extreme things have gotten in their Orwellian determination to extinguish people's understanding of history and the real struggles. So just going back to Joe Neguse to close here, we are trying to fight this however we can. More than 350 lawsuits have been brought across the country. We have preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders in more than 200 court rulings. And we're winning more than 90% of the time at the district court level. Again, overwhelmingly, we're winning at the appeals court level. But when we get to the Supreme Court, which itself has been gerrymandered and sliced and diced by the Republicans, we, are kind of in a draw situation. It's a very mixed bag with Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas and a mega majority there. And we have to be prepared for everything that's going to come. Ultimately, we're fighting in the courts and we're fighting however we can in the House and the Senate. But ultimately, there's got to be a change and a turnover in the U.S. Congress. And that means that the people must be completely vigilant and resilient in resisting and opposing authoritarianism and the destruction of the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, and the two most beautiful words in the English language, due process, the idea that separates our rights and our liberties from arbitrary state power. So thank you, Congresswoman Wilson, and thank you to the wonderful people who sent you to Washington for being in the thick of this fight and not accepting the authoritarian destruction of our country. I'll yield back to you.
And Congressman, before you yield back, there is a question, and I'm going to pile one on top because I have the floor. But the first question I have is around redistricting. You brought up the racist redistricting processes of some of the state legislators throughout the country. And one thing that we've seen is the conversation around what other Democratic governors could do to kind of balance the scale. What folks aren't necessarily talking about is what that does to people of color who will lose their representation. We've seen it happen in Florida. We're watching it potentially happen right in Texas, as we know, and why Democrats left the state to avoid having to vote on such a racist redistricting plan. And then also Elizabeth Judd from Miami asked if we're prepared to or for Trump to possibly declare an emergency and not allow an election. Are we prepared for that?
All great questions. Well, a Voting Rights Act lawsuit's already been brought by our colleagues and by civil rights groups in Texas against this abysmal redistricting, which targeted several minority members of Congress, Henry Cuellar and Vicente Gonzalez and Greg Casar, also the first lesbian person who ever represented Texas, Julie Johnson. Her district was targeted, and the district of Al Green. So most of the people and most of the district targeted were majority minority in some way. So there is a strong Voting Rights Act lawsuit that's being offered. But again, that's based on, pre-MAGA, pre-Trump judicial thinking. I mean, these are people who basically think that the Constitution and the rule of law mean whatever favors MAGA and Donald Trump. In other words, they've been totally swept up in the force field of Donald Trump's mentality. So I don't place a lot of hope in that, but we're going to have to push that as far as it goes. But unfortunately, it ends up with the Supreme Court. And I think we know where most of those justices are on that. The other point that was made, much more optimistic about, I don't think Donald Trump will try to cancel the election. The President of the United States has no power constitutionally over elections. Under Article 1, Section 4, Congress has the power to alter the time, place, and manner of elections that have been set by the states. So Congress could act, and they don't have a 60-vote majority in the Senate. So even if they were to try something as ridiculous as to postpone or cancel the election. We would be able to stop them in the Senate, even if they had all the Republicans in the House, despite the fact that it's a very narrow margin. But it won't be so much canceling the election. What they're going to do is try to put the election in a straitjacket. And what I mean by that is like what they're doing with the gerrymandering. They're trying to basically gerrymander the election and alter the terms of the election long in advance, so there's very little public choice left. They can do that by making it more difficult to register. They can do that by making it more difficult to vote. Donald Trump is talking about extinguishing mail-in balloting because they know that lots of Democrats vote by mail-in balloting. There's nothing wrong with mail-in balloting. That's how Donald Trump has voted, and yet he's trying to spread conspiracy theories about mail-in balloting. They're trying to undercut the number of polling places, close polling places around the country, make it more difficult for college students to vote, and so on. So we just have to be fighting this at the state level in every state. Obviously, in the blue states where we defend everybody's right to vote, even if they're not going to vote for us, the right to vote is much safer than in the red states. But we got to work with partners in the not-for-profit community, the NAACP, the ACLU, and so on, to defend the right to vote, to defend the integrity of the process. And we have to do that, especially in the swing states where MAGA has shown their greatest willingness to try to overturn elections. And let's never forget what happened on January 6, 2021. That was an effort to use insurrectionary violence in a political coup to reverse an election which Joe Biden won by more than 7 million votes against Donald Trump, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. And they had a whole scheme cooked up to try to get Vice President Pence simply to declare Trump the winner, or to say there was no winner because he was returning electors back to the state capitals and he was going to kick the whole thing into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election, where they knew that we would be voting not according to one member, one vote, but one state, one vote. In any event, they surrounded that coup with all of the violence of the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the Ku Klux Klan, and all the other extremist groups that they had mobilized to go and attack our police officers. More than 140 of them were wounded and injured, and to give bloody instructions to the mob that Trump had assembled on the internet. So we know that they're very serious about not losing an election, and we've got to make certain that we are fighting every step along the way in the states to make sure that the ballots are all counted.
Thank you so much, Congressman. As always, very informative. We really appreciate your responses and for joining us. For all of you listening or watching, as a reminder, if you have a question, you can ask it at any point. Just press *3 and someone will take your question down. Now I have the opportunity to bring to the stage former Secretary of Health and Human Services and former Governor of Kansas, Kathleen Sebelius, to describe some of the harmful cuts to health care that have taken place under this law and what the American people should expect in the coming months. Madam Secretary.
Well, thank you, Angela. It's great to have a chance to be with you, and certainly to be seeing and hearing from the wonderful Frederica Wilson. Again, I had the chance to serve with Congresswoman Wilson when she came to Congress and was a fierce champion for healthcare and science and education, and a lot of the issues I worked on with children and families with President Obama. And I'm glad to see that she continues the effort to inform and engage her constituents on a regular basis. There's no question that all of us, at least I do, every time I listen to Jamie Raskin, I come away learning something new. He's an amazing constitutional lawyer, and also somebody who translates the Constitution into very meaningful day-to-day activities. And thank you to Congressman Raskin for what he does every day to defend all of us. So let me just make a couple of things very clear for the people of Florida. I live in one of the 10 states where the Republicans have been playing politics with people's health care since 2010, like Florida. We did not expand Medicaid, much to my shock and horror, even though we have a Democratic governor who has that as her number one priority. She has a veto-proof Republican legislature, and we cannot get Medicaid on the ballot. We don't have initiative and referendum in Kansas, so we are stuck. You are stuck in Florida because you have a governor who has refused to allow the hundreds of thousands of Floridians who have had federal benefits dedicated to their health care since 2010. He refuses to allow that to happen in the state of Florida. And that, in and of itself, is immoral. It's wrong. It is harming people. It's probably killing people in the state of Florida. So, fast forward to today, to the big ugly bill, or whatever you want to refer to it, this hodgepodge of just terrible ideas that was forced through with the narrowest majority in the House of Representatives, which contains really a terrible slew of policies that is going to bring great harm to people across this country, and certainly great harm to Floridians. On the healthcare area, there is about $800 million, I'm sorry, $800 billion taken out of Medicaid over a 10-year period of time. And those numbers just make people's eyes glaze over, but let's just say it's a hell of a lot of money. And Medicaid, to remind you, is the program where it is the largest payer for nursing homes in this country. So that is possible to be harmed. It is the largest payer for special needs kids in this country, for disability patients in this country, for lower income working adults to get qualification for to see a doctor or buy medicines, for pregnant women and children, on and on. This incredibly important program, which has been in place since 1965, is now under great threat, and particularly threatened are rural hospitals, where about 30% of their funding comes from Medicaid. They are likely to be slashed in Florida, in Kansas, around the country. It's a devastating program. But since Florida hasn't expanded Medicaid, since there aren't a number of working adults on the expanded program, what is really going to hurt Floridians in this bill around healthcare are all the cuts that they are making behind the scenes, if you will, with the Affordable Care Act, with Obamacare passed in 2010. As Angela's already said, there was a dramatic vote in the first Trump administration where he promised to get rid of the Affordable Care Act on day one. Senator John McCain saved the bill by voting no in the United States Senate, and it has been thriving and surviving for the last 14 years, with a record enrollment last year. We had the lowest health uninsured numbers ever in the country. People are getting amazing results. But because Florida and Kansas are states where there isn't expanded Medicaid, more people are in the Affordable Care Act than in many marketplaces in the country. More lower income Floridians have taken advantage of the expanded tax credit to join the marketplaces and have affordable health insurance for themselves and their kids. They can buy medicines, they can take their kids to a doctor, they can pay their bills. They're not going bankrupt. In Florida alone, this bill will mean about 600,000 people will lose their health coverage. Most of those folks in the marketplaces. And the way it's being done is that barriers are going to be put up. You will not be able to automatically re-enroll if you've been a member for years. You will have to fill out all the paperwork all over again, verify your income all over again. You may have to come in person and do some of this business. The paperwork challenges for both the Medicaid population and the Affordable Care Act population are extensive, and it's designed to really let people fall into big holes. Make sure that they, when their lives are busy and they're trying to pay their rent and get their kids to school and buy gym shoes, that they forget that there's a limited enrollment period. They forget that they didn't have the right document at the right time, and there is no grace period. There's no opportunity to file a reprieve until the following year. So it's going to mean not only a lot of people will lose their health insurance coverage, but a lot of people will not be able to pay their doctor bills, which means those doctors will be in jeopardy, particularly doctors who serve low income folks. Hospitals who rely on paying customers when they come in the door will be in much greater jeopardy than they are before. People will not be able to keep their jobs if they rely on medication to have a stable and steady life. They won't be able to afford their medications. They won't have the opportunity to get preventive care and get treatment after a screening finds a cancer cause because they won't have health insurance to deal with it. I remember meeting with groups of women before the Affordable Care Act was passed and having people say to me, why should I get a mammogram? Because I don't have any insurance to pay for an operation if I have cancer. I don't have any way to go on with medical care. And we will return to those days where medical bankruptcy will be on the upswing, where doctors and hospitals will be in real jeopardy of closing their practices and closing their doors. And all of this because these folks just do not care about health care. There are people who say they don't know the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Well, I'll tell you one big difference. An organizing principle of the Democratic Party since before the days of Franklin Roosevelt have been a dedication to universal health care. That's what Democrats believe in. That's what Congresswoman Wilson and Jamie Raskin fight for. That's what Joe Neguse fights for. It is a key difference, and this bill does terrible things. So they cut science, they cut food assistance from people, they cut the public health benefits from the Centers for Disease Control, they cut medical research, but they are really slashing and burning the number of people who will have health insurance. And maybe as many as 11 million Americans, men, women, and children, will lose their health coverage. And as I say, the estimate is almost 600,000 of those folks reside in the state of Florida. Winning back the House, keeping the voice of Congresswoman Wilson there loud and clear is the way that we can put some check on this reckless operation that will um, literally kill people in the long run. It will destroy lives. It will mean shorter mortality rates. It will mean less productive workforce. It will mean a less secure nation. And it is a real tragedy that these folks are dismantling programs that have helped so many Americans.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. I hate that we are laying out such a grim picture of healthcare in this country. There is a question that I want to get to from Jocelyn in Miami Beach for you. She says, when can I actually expect healthcare prices to rise? I hear all this talk about healthcare prices going up, but I'm not sure how or when it will happen.
Well, it's a great question, Jocelyn. So, one thing could happen this year if Congress and the Republicans so far have refused to go along with the Democrats on this issue. If Congress does not reinstate the tax benefits that were put in place in the Biden administration, the additional funding that a lower income family can qualify for to help buy their own health insurance in the marketplace. That's set to expire at the end of 2025. And if that is not renewed, prices in the marketplace plans across this country will jump dramatically this year. It will happen at the end of this year. It will mean open enrollment for the 2026 plans will be dramatically different. And hundreds of millions of people are going to lose their health insurance because they won't be able to afford it. And companies will drop out of the market. They cannot sell insurance if only the folks who are sick are the ones buying coverage. You suddenly do not have an insurance market. You basically have a high risk pool. So that could happen as quickly as this year. If you're a Medicaid beneficiary, you again may lose coverage based on how draconian your state is, how fast they put in place some of these rules. You could lose coverage fairly quickly. This year, next year, it's a little unclear how states will implement the portions of this act, but it isn't just prices going up, it's that you may actually lose coverage altogether.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. We now will hear from former Secretary Sue, who will talk to us about the state of our economy and what is at stake.
I apologize, Angela. I'm going to have to run. I'm in a different state. I just flew in and was able to join you for a few minutes tonight, but I just wanted to say I'm going to disappear from the screen, and I didn't want the other speakers to think I was just not interested. This is a compelling program, but I got to run.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary.
Well, thank you all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And Congresswoman Wilson, it is so wonderful to see you again. And thank you so much for gathering all of us today. And I want to thank all the community members in Florida who are joining us this evening. I just wanted to very quickly go over some of the attacks on working families and the impacts on working people of what this administration has done with their bill. But I think it makes sense to just take a moment to think about what is the role of government in a moment like this? Does government exist to fight for you, or does it exist to benefit themselves? Do people in government care about the people who are doing everything that you can to make a living, to save for your retirement, to pay your rent or your mortgage, to get your kids ready for the start of school, or just for their own friends? And I think what this administration is sending a very clear message about is who they actually care about, and why they're in government is to just benefit themselves and the few. At the same time, they want you to believe that it's your neighbor or the people who live in the community nearby who are the problem, so that you aren't paying attention to the real threat, which is the policies that they've put in place. So on the economy, the problem is that this big, ugly bill is a big, ugly betrayal of working people. It's a billionaire giveaway to the friends of this administration. And all the cuts that you've already heard about, and some of the things that I'm going to talk about, are really to pay for tax giveaways for the wealthy. So this bill, this law, has been described as the largest wealth transfer to the richest Americans. And it's true, right? Prices are higher. Jobs are more scarce. So if you're looking for a job, that's getting harder. And for jobs that people do have, incomes are going down and jobs are more dangerous. So let me just say something about grocery prices for a moment, because we all heard President Trump say that on day one, he was going to bring down those prices. And he's failed at that. Food prices have increased since he came into office. For example, Walmart already raised prices on bananas in May, and that's their top selling product. And on August 1st, Trump announced higher tariffs of up to 15% on the 5 countries that supply nearly all bananas sold in the United States. So that's one product among many where not only are prices not going down, his policies are actually exacerbating inflation that's making things harder for working families. In addition, the school year is about to begin. Maybe it's already begun in your family, but families can already expect to pay $163 more to pack their child's lunchbox compared to the last school year. And again, Trump's tariffs are contributing to those inflationary pressures. There's a survey that is posted at the Century Foundation's website where you can go and see more about what's happening with back to school prices as a result of Donald Trump's policies. Just one thing on energy prices. If you are among the millions of households that took advantage of Biden era investments to help you retrofit your home, to help you bring down energy costs, well, the big ugly betrayal is eliminating tax credits that would help you save on your energy costs. Those are going to expire. So in their desire to reverse everything that was done under the Biden administration, they're also reversing things that had a very real, direct, positive impact on working families. If you receive SNAP benefits, your benefits are likely to be cut or to completely disappear. Trump's new tax betrayal, his big ugly betrayal, cut $186 billion from SNAP funding. And it's also going to be more restrictive as to who can get benefits. So for example, able-bodied adults ages 18 to 64 without dependents have to now meet expanded work requirements of at least 80 hours per month to remain eligible for benefits. Previously, this requirement applied only to adults up to the age of 54. So this is also an attack on older Americans. Populations that face barriers to employment, like veterans, will no longer be exempt from certain work requirements. So this is also an attack on veterans. Secretary Sebelius already talked about Medicaid. I won't talk about that, but job training programs. The federal government actually funds a lot of job training programs. Some of you may already be in them. Some of you may have already seen the cuts. So for example, there was a senior community service employment program, SCSEP, that is the only federal community service and jobs training program targeted to low-income unemployed seniors. I know if you're a senior that's in one of these programs, it's because you have more talent to contribute, and you should be able to do so and get a paycheck when you do. The Trump's Department of Labor has already ceased putting out funding that was already allocated for these programs. And this has caused a lot of uncertainty and disruption to existing programs. And then his big ugly betrayal would further cut those programs. I'll say one last thing, which is about worker violations. For workers who go to work every single day and should receive a just day's pay for a hard day's work, should know that they're going to come home healthy and safe. Donald Trump has made it that harder too. So American workers get $50 billion stolen from them a year in wage theft. That means you worked, you should have been paid, and you didn't get paid. Wage theft is a bigger problem. It's a bigger cost to Americans than all of robberies, burglaries, and motor vehicle thefts combined. Yet this administration is vilifying workers, increasing militarization against workers, allowing workers to be rounded up on their way to work or at work, and at the same time cutting the agencies that are responsible for protecting workers from wage theft. It's also the same agency, the Department of Labor, is supposed to protect workers and protect their health and safety. Well, I know in Florida, the hazards of heat. And under the Biden administration, we proposed a rule that would protect workers from heat. And this administration needs to finish that rule. In fact, in Florida, it's especially important because your governor has told your local legislators that they cannot protect workers from the hazards of heat. So the only way to do that is through a federal standard. And this Department of Labor needs to do that and has shown no interest in doing it. So this president's record on jobs is not good. The first time around, he was the only president since World War II to have left office with fewer jobs than when he came in. And so he knows that this is an area that he is vulnerable on. So instead of being honest with the American people, instead of taking a look at what he could be doing better, instead of surrounding himself with people who could help support working families, he just fired the person who tells the truth about where jobs are going in this administration. And that's why events like this are so important. That's why I'm so honored to be here to help share information and to share facts. And I hope that you will continue to engage, to speak out, to demand that rules and protections that should be in place for working families actually are there. Thank you again so much, Congresswoman, and I'll turn it back.
Thank you so much, Secretary Sue. As you spoke this evening, right behind you, you have the new Jim Crow up on your shelf. And wow, did we not realize how close to Jim Crow we would be in 2025. But thanks to the Project 2025 and all of its implementations, more than 60% so far, we are where we are. And so the fight continues. And with that, we will now go to the former Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. Secretary Sue, if you could stay on, we'll make sure we get questions to you before you drop off. But Secretary Cardona, we'd love for you to talk and speak to how this big ugly bill will impact student loans and the critical importance of the Department of Education, especially as they seek to dismantle it. Secretary?
Sure. Thank you for having me. What an important conversation, not only for Floridians, but across the country. Someone I love very dearly lives in Florida. And yes, Congresswoman, I love you too. But my sister lives there. And, I know the impacts that it's going to have on her and her family and on Americans across the country. So I want to thank you for the invitation, first of all. It's good to see my friends and colleagues on the call. I just heard Julie Sue and Congressman Raskin. Thank you also for all you do. It really is an honor for us to continue to fight. I always say that the titles change, but the purpose doesn't. So thank you for this opportunity to talk, not only as a former secretary, but as an educator and as a father about the impacts. And I want to start off by just kind of putting it out there that this isn't a red or blue issue. This is a kid issue when we talk about education, that when we see the impacts on our students, we're not looking at our students as Republican students or Democrat students. Hungry kids are hungry kids, and that's what we're going to have. When I talk about higher education, before I move on to that, I do want to say that it probably will impact red states even more than blue states, because the red states in many parts of our country are more dependent on federal funding than some of the blue states. So I just want to be very clear that, as we move forward, we need to really recognize that we're doing our enemy's work for us if we cut out education. When you cut funding for science, when you cut funding for research, when you cut funding for public education, which should serve as the foundation on which skyscrapers are built in this country, you're doing our enemy's work for us, for them. So I just want to put that out there to say, in higher education, there's over $300 billion in cuts that is going to cap loans. And when we say it's going to cap loans, it's going to impact the students who don't have the funding in the beginning to go to college. So they need to take out loans in order to go to college. The percentage of Black and brown students that had to take out loans for their entire amount was much higher than other populations. So these impacts affect everyone, but they don't affect everyone equally. I just want to put that out there, that those furthest from opportunity are going to be impacted the most by what I'm going to tell you. So we have higher education funding cuts, the restructuring of the repayment for loans, something that we work so hard to try to address. We were dealing with 1 million people going into default every year on their student loans. We were trying to make it so that people were successful paying their loans. So we created different plans to help people be successful repaying their loans. Well, those plans are scrapped. So now you have limited options. And what we're going to see across the country are people going into default at a much higher rate. So no one wins when you have more people going into default in the community, can't pay off their loans, hurts their credit score. It's an economic quagmire is what it's going to become. We had 1 million a year that were defaulting, and we were trying to fix that, and we were getting there. Yet we're taking so many steps backwards. So that's another thing in the higher education space. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, the big cloud. There is an attack on public education. Manufactured culture wars divided communities across our country with the intent to privatize a public good. I'm a product of a public education system. I went to a local public elementary school. That's, I had only what that school had to offer, nothing more. But what we are seeing happening systematically across the country, and encouraged by this administration, encouraged by the bill, is to support vouchers that take money from already underfunded school districts to pay for private vouchers. Now, I'm a big fan of parent choice. I'm a big fan of giving students options, giving family options, but I'm not a fan of taking money from a school where the teachers get paid 24% less than people in other professions with similar degrees, taking those dollars, handing it over in a scholarship to someone that was already paying for private school, and having that school decide if they want to take the child with Down syndrome, having that school decide if they want to take that child that's reading below grade level. It's harder and more expensive to teach students with disabilities. Are we saying that we're taking from our already cash-strapped public education schools and we're paying a private institution at the expense of the public school, but we only hold the public schools accountable for meeting students' needs if they have an individualized education plan? We're destroying public education. So what you'll see is, in the form of scholarship or vouchers, is an erosion of public education as we know it. The great equalizer. It's being taken away. There's a lot of money to be made in education if you privatize it. Look at what happened in higher education with these for-profit institutions robbing veterans, robbing first-gen kids, and not giving them a degree that's worth the paper it's written on. Well, I worry that we're going to see that now in the K-12 space. There's funds cut for community colleges, for college and career pathways. We know in this country, we did a lot of work in the last administration to really incentivize building here and making sure that we have pathways into these careers. The CHIPS and Science Act, the bipartisan infrastructure plan. If you drive down the highway and you see construction, you can thank the work that was done in bipartisan fashion in the last administration. Now, nobody loves traffic, but those are jobs. Those are union jobs. Those are jobs that create middle class. And it was our job in the K-12 space and in the two-year colleges to create pathways to the high skill, high paying careers. That's all being cut. So the impacts are multi-generational. And I want folks to be very clear that you're going to feel the impacts when you don't have after school programming, when over 18 million kids in our country are no longer eligible for free meals in school. Many times the only warm meal that a kid will get is in their school. So that's going to get cut. Summer school programming, that's going to get cut. Early childhood education, that's going to get cut. For the 26 million students that qualify for Title I funding, okay, or the 8 million students with IEPs, or the 9 million students that are in rural communities, or the 1.1 million students who are homeless. Those are the students that are going to be impacted the most by the impacts of not only this bill, but the actions over the last several months in this administration. And then I'll close with this. If that's not enough, the dismantling of the Federal Department of Education is taking out the safeguards to protect that all students have access to a public education. And what we're going to see now is the Office for Civil Rights that's been gutted. Their job was to make sure that states are providing services to all students, regardless of race or zip code. Well, if you get rid of the Department of Education and OCR, who's watching to make sure that public education is for all students in this country? No one is. And who benefits from it? Those people that are out to make a profit. So there's as Julie Sue said, who's benefiting from this? The billionaires and the millionaires that are getting tax breaks on the backs of our kids while their stomachs are grumbling. Thank you for having me here. We're going to continue to fight. We need to make sure we're making sense about this, what it means in the community. And, you can count on me and public educators across the country to stand up for what's right. And I appreciate you having me on this call.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. There is a question for you. I appreciate all that you shared, particularly the emphasis on the manufactured culture wars. Just that alone has gotten us to a very, very dangerous place. We have a question from Sarah Go out of Miami Gardens, and she asks, I'm a private school science teacher. My husband is a public school history and civics teacher. As we all know, education is crucial, yet public education is often underfunded. What is being done to reduce class sizes in public schools, provide counseling and mental health services for students, and provide additional resources for teachers and parents?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you for your service. And for your husband's service. I heard in the question that both are educators. Thank you for your service and what you do for our kids. Look, what I can tell you is that the last administration provided funding for 16,000 school social workers, school counselors, to make sure that the mental health of our kids was not an afterthought, that we weren't waiting for the crisis to meet them when they needed help. In terms of class size, what I see happening now is the opposite. Not only are public education dollars being taken away to pay for some of these vouchers, but what we're finding is because of the shortage of teachers and because we're not respecting our educators as a country, and we look to blame schools instead of support them, it's getting harder and harder to fill these positions. So not only will you have more children in your classroom, there's a potential that your children are going to be taught by a revolving door of substitute teachers because they cannot hire anyone that's certified. I think it was Florida where the governor, wanted to allow spouses of service members to be teachers. And I'm all for pathways for anyone to become a teacher. We need more teachers. But this is not a hobby. Teaching is not a hobby. Education is not a hobby. You have to have credentials. We wouldn't do that for pilots. We wouldn't do that for doctors. Why would we do that for the people who are responsible for educating the next generation of leaders? So we need to take education seriously. We need to make sure that it's funded. I mentioned earlier, educators on average make 24% less than people with similar degrees. So my mentality was we need to really focus on what I call the ABCs of teaching, providing agency for our educators, better working conditions, and competitive salary. That's what we need to be focusing on. And again, this is not a red or blue issue. There are teachers all over the country that are using their own dollars to pay for supplies for students, yet those same teachers qualify for state assistance. We need to stop normalizing teachers working for Uber on the weekends. We got to do better as a country. And I appreciate the person who asked the question works in a private school. Her husband works in a public school. I appreciate that because at the end of the day, when we invest in education, everyone wins. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. You're exactly right on the affordability issues, even with our teachers. We did a tour event in Atlanta and met a teacher who, when she goes home at night, she goes home to sleep in her car. Should not be so for the people who pour into the lives of our young people. I now have the opportunity to introduce to you all Sue Chung to talk about how the big ugly law pours more resources into ICE and how this administration over the past couple of months has continued to terrorize immigrant communities across this country. Sue?
Thank you, Angela. And thank you, Congresswoman Wilson, for inviting me here today and allowing me the opportunity to speak to the thousands of participants joining us so I can share important breaking immigration updates and give insight on HR1's funding and how it's being used in the current state with rapid and unprecedented arrests and detention of immigrants who represent our American communities, immigrants who represent our families, children, friends, business owners, and neighbors, and reflect and represent all of our family stories. My name's Sui Chung. I'm Executive Director of Americans for Immigrant Justice, the largest statewide immigrant defense nonprofit in Florida. We have been providing free legal services to low-income individuals through direct representation, impact litigation, and national policy work for the last 30 years. So the new funding bill, HR1, what are the immigration implications? Enormous infusion of money to immigration enforcement, providing detention infrastructure, a big surge over $100 billion in funding through 2029 has been provided to Department of Homeland Security, Immigration, Customs and Enforcement, or ICE, and Customs and Border Patrol, CBP. More than $45 billion is earmarked for ICE detention space. This is more than the government spent on detaining immigrants during the Obama, Biden, and first Trump administrations combined. So very significant. Combined, those three administrations did not spend this much on ICE detention. Between 80,000 and 100,000 detention beds are expected to be added. ICE currently has about 60,000 people in custody. That's a lot of taxpayer dollars. The majority of people in custody do not have any criminal history. Only 28% of those detained by ICE have a prior criminal conviction. Many of this criminal contact is from low-level offenses like traffic offenses. So again, really harming our American families right now, mixed status families and children. Again, highlighting family separation is occurring every day in our state. HR1 allocates funds for the construction of multiple new ICE facilities or conversion of other facilities for the detention of non-citizens. The law increases reliance on private contractors and temporary tent camps with limited oversight. Example, Everglades Detention Center, or cruelly named, quote, Alligator Alcatraz, was a test balloon used to push the limits of legal authority to hold non-citizens in a large-scale facility with limited to no legal access in substandard, horrific conditions. What are the implications of this huge infusion of taxpayer dollars into immigration enforcement, scale up of mass detention, as a primary immigration control strategy and through exacerbating conditions, civil liberty violations, and human rights concerns. The bill also authorizes construction of over 1,000 miles of border wall, deployment of thousands of new ICE agents and CBP officers, more than 10,000 hires, acquisition of military-grade surveillance technology, such as drones, sensors, and facial recognition. This will lead to significant militarization of the immigration system with increased surveillance and criminalization for crossing the border. The bill restricts due process and legal access for immigrants who are eligible to pursue legal relief and status in the U.S. Legal representation has been tremendously impacted for people in custody. For example, at Everglades Detention Camp, Americans for Immigrant Justice, ACLU National Prison Project, and ACLU of Florida filed litigation regarding the lack of access to counsel and the inability of those detained at the facility to communicate with counsel, formulate a legal defense, or even see an immigration judge. That case is ongoing. Venue has been changed to Collier County, and the case will continue in Fort Myers. At present, the surge in detention capacity outpaces legal resources and representation. The bill allocates a staggering $46 million for expanding detention, including family residential centers. Federally funded legal service programs have been eliminated in parallel with heightened enforcement funded by H.R. 1. The administration has terminated 5 federally funded programs that provided legal information and basic assistance to unrepresented immigrants. About 49% of individuals facing deportation now lack legal counsel entirely. Meanwhile, access to legal representation correlates strongly with case outcomes. In January 2025, 77% of immigrants with attorneys were allowed to remain in the U.S., demonstrating how critical counsel is to due process. What is the update on ICE detention in Florida specifically? Again, I keep on mentioning Everglades Detention Camp, or quote, Alligator Alcatraz. Fortunately, last week, the expansion of the facility is now on hold, a facility that was to hold 4,000 to 5,000 immigrants in the middle of the Everglades. A federal judge issued a preliminary injunction last week halting further expansion of the facility, and within 60 days, ordered the removal of temporary infrastructure, fencing, lighting, generators, wastewater systems. The facility cannot admit new immigrants during this period. In response, Florida has appealed that ruling, aiming to lift the injunction and continue operations at the site. In the future, Florida announced plans to roll out a new, quote, deportation depot. On August 14th, Florida announced a new detention center at Baker Correctional Institution in North Florida called the Deportation Depot. It will hold over 1,300 individuals and will be easily accessible through a nearby airport to streamline deportations. This expansion is also driven by federal funding and state partnerships in Florida. Florida's expansion efforts are part of a broader trend fueled by federal funding from H.R. 1, which allocates tens of billions for detention infrastructure. Florida, along with states like Indiana and Nebraska, is leveraging these resources to rapidly scale ICE detention capacity. Last, I want to talk about the now enhanced 287G enforcement in Florida. Florida has significantly increased its use of 287G agreements, a program allowing local law enforcement to act on behalf of ICE. Highlights include statewide participation in all Florida counties, bolstered by pressure from the state government. Nearly all Florida Highway Patrol, 1,800, are deputized under the task force model, leading to 3,500 apprehensions since March, often coming from routine traffic stops. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement is now fully certified under 287G, and enabling them to carry out ICE immigration functions statewide. Civil rights groups express deep concern over the erosion of the community trust and the potential for racial profiling under 287G agreements. We're currently in a very difficult moment in the history of Florida and for our nation with this tremendous increase in funding for immigration enforcement. This impacts our safety, the stability of all our communities, our businesses and economies, and the families and children in the state. I thank all of you for listening today, and I encourage everyone to speak out, to become involved, support your immigrant neighbors. This is, again, the story, all of our story. Immigration is all of our story. And the current landscape is extremely troubling. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Sui, please accept my apology for pronouncing your name wrong. Incredible information here. At this point, we're going to open it up to just two questions for Sui and for Secretary Sue. Sui, the question is, what is next for folks with temporary protected status from your purview? And then for Secretary Sue, the question is, if you can tell Evelyn from Miami, the last question was from Lucy from Miami. You can tell Evelyn from Miami what steps are being taken to address inflation. $1 million question, no pun intended. I am increasingly concerned about its impact on rent, mortgage, groceries, utilities, etc. So those are the two closing questions, and then we'll turn it over to Congresswoman Wilson.
So regarding TPS, very complicated situation right now because there are multiple countries involved with different expiration dates and different pieces of litigation that have been filed. We did have a temporary win in that the sudden cancellation of Haiti TPS, it was restored to the original February date. So at least there is somewhat of a time period for Haitians until February to remain on TPS status. Of course, there are other TPS statuses that have expired or are expiring, in the near future. There are pieces of litigation happening pertaining to TPS across the country. And what I would recommend for those who have TPS status or have family members and colleagues to consult an immigration attorney. Very, very important. And I do want to state that Americans for Immigrant Justice, we have a rapid response hotline. You can find that information at raise.is. And our contact information, our detention hotline, and the ability to have a consultation with an immigration attorney, you will be able to do so. So really encourage everyone. There could be other pathways for you that you are not aware of, but AI Justice is releasing information on TPS and will continue to do so. So please follow us and we'll provide any breaking positive updates for those of you with TPS.
And
Sue.
I'll jump in, on the other question, which is so important and such a good one. I will say that I think it is one shared by millions and millions of Americans today, wondering what it is that Donald Trump is going to do to bring down cost as he said he would do. I wish there was a good answer for that. There's nothing to indicate that the Trump administration is actually prioritizing that. Again, they've made cuts and given relief to people who really don't need it, right? Including classes of folks who make a lot of money and have a lot of wealth, and some of whom said, we don't even want the tax cut. We don't need it. But that's what he's been focused on. And instead of cutting inflation, and all of his policies are actually having the opposite effect from bringing down costs, right? It's, his tariffs, the chaotic approach that he's taken to it is increasing costs. It's also affecting small businesses. And so, there are big job creators in our communities. And so it's not just that costs are actually going up, it's that job opportunities are going down. And so you have both things being more expensive and the ways that people would support themselves and have the money to pay for them also getting decreasing under this administration. So this is one of many promises that Donald Trump has broken to the American people. And I think it's a fair question. It's a question that we should keep on asking. We should be asking it loudly, and we should demand that the administration do right by the broad sector of people who live in this country, as opposed to the small class of friends and cronies that they've been working on behalf of since they got into office in January.
Thank you so much for that answer, Secretary Sue. Thank you to everyone who tuned in this evening and asked questions during this event. I learned a lot from you all, and I know you all learned so much from our incredible panel. We did try to get to as many questions as possible, but we also wanted to make sure you all were equipped with information you need to know to survive in this era. There are opportunities to still submit questions. You can call Congresswoman Wilson's office at 305-690-5905. Again, that's 305-690-5905. Or you may also stay on the line this evening if you'd like to subscribe but haven't been able to talk to a team member just yet. You'll be able to leave a message with your email in short order. And with that, I am going to pass it off to our incredible host tonight, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, to close us out.
Oh boy, this is truly amazing. Thank you so much. It's coming to the end. Here we are. Thank you so much to the fantastic Angela Rye. We appreciate you. We love you so much. Thank you so much for your mastery in moderating this important conversation today. And I want to say thanks to everyone who took the time to join us for this important discussion on the recent state of our democracy, our health, and our future. We appreciated the opportunity to speak directly with over 20,000 people and answer your questions. I want to give a great big thank you to all of our special guests, our experts, my colleagues for joining us here today for this terrific event. It would not have been possible without you. I am indebted to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for the information, incredible information that all of our constituents need to hear. Again, if you were not able to get to if we did not get to your question this evening, stay on the line. If you'd like to subscribe but haven't talked to a team member yet, you'll be able to leave a message with your email momentarily or call my office at 305-690-5905. Let's be real. This is a tough moment for our country, for working families, for everyone. It seems as if the laws and actions being taken are with the explicit purpose of causing harm and suffering amongst the American people. But we cannot sit back and let this just happen. Even for me, this is tough. I've seen presidents come and go, but nothing like what we're seeing now. But that doesn't mean that we give up. So here's what we're doing. Me, along with some of the others you have heard on this call, have started the Rapid Response Task Force and Litigation Working Group, which is fighting this administration in real time through litigation to shut down its dangerous agenda. Congress also has 1 month to pass a budget for you, the American people. And I promise you, we will fight against any budget that causes more harm or strife to you, the American people. And while Republicans are marching us to a shutdown, we stand ready to discuss in good faith ways to keep government open and deliver a budget that will not hurt the American people. We're not going to back down while people worry about their housing, their health care, or whether they can put food on the table. The budget must reflect the challenges Americans face right now, and we will hold every elected official accountable for that. On top of this, Many of the worst parts of the big ugly law do not take effect for some time. So keep that in mind. So we will be fighting to ensure that we reverse the worst aspects of the law even before they take effect. And I will continue to speak up and call out the hypocrisy and injustice as I see it, because we must keep the pressure on. Now, here's what I need from you. Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the White House. But if Democrats just have 4 Republicans who join us, we can turn this script around on many of the harmful actions being pushed right now. So I want you to call them. Call them and demand answers. They're trying to stay silent, but don't let them. Call 202-224-3121 and ask for any member of Congress that you need to speak with. Then call the White House at 202-456-1111 and let them know exactly how you feel, how pissed off you are. Let them know that you're angry, that you're mad. And if you're a reporter on this call, put Republicans on the spot. Make them take a stand. Don't let them give you no comment on these important issues. And trust me, I know it may feel hopeless. It may feel hopeless, but as we get closer to the midterms, you're going to see all of them coming to beg for your vote. And you have to show up and show out and show your power that they work for you, not the other way around. So we have to keep pushing. We have to keep calling. We have to keep showing up. Talk to your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, your family. Tell them what's at stake. Our voice and our unity are the most powerful tools we have right now. That is going to be a fight. Just know that this is going to be a long fight. But trust me, we cannot back down. But I want to thank you for joining us this evening and being a part of this discussion. We'll host more of these events in the future to keep you informed on what we're working on and other important updates. And if you aren't already tuned in to my social media, make sure to follow me so that we can share important updates with you, which we do almost daily. And it lets you know what this administration is doing, so you will not be in the dark. Thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and have a good evening. And especially thank you to the children, the students who joined us this evening, who told me that they would be on the call. Thank you so much.